Hi, I'm Fraser Douglas, the avid tent camper.
I'm Carlos Diaz. In this video, we are going to present our picks for the best family camping tents for 2021.
In this review, we'll only discuss six-person tents with about 90 square feet of floor space, because I believe this is the ideal size for most camping families. This size provides a considerable amount of interior space, but yet is small enough to fit in any campsite. Young couples traveling in a small vehicle may have to settle for a smaller four-person tent, but anything smaller will not provide much comfort. And larger families traveling in an SUV or with a utility trailer could upgrade to an 8-person tent, but anything larger will be difficult to fit into many campsites.
Now, let's summarize some common tent designs.
The old wedge tent was a simple single-wall tent that was supported by a long ridge pole at the top, held up by two rigid vertical poles, one at the front door and one at the back. The primary limitation of this design was the steeply sloped sidewalls made it difficult for an adult to stand up inside and walk around. And so tent makers developed the wall tent. It was a wedge tent with sides that were pulled out to provide more standing and walking space. It had a less steeply sloped roof and vertical sidewalls that were 4 to 5 feet high. A little while later, a cabin tent was developed that was basically a wall tent with windows and a sewn-in floor. But it still had the old wedge tent structure of a long center ridge pole that was supported by two vertical upright poles. Another old, simple, single-wall tent design was the bell tent or Sibley tent. It had only one pole in the center of the tent that made a high center peak. But again, its walls were steeply sloped that provided very little room for standing up and walking around inside the tent. So tent makers modified this design to make an umbrella tent. At first, the umbrella tent had a center pole inside the tent that made a small peak at the top with arms that spread out to reduce the slope of the roof and to make the sidewalls more vertical. But that center peak pole always seemed to be in the way. So tent makers modified the umbrella tent frame back in the 1930s to 4 rigid corner side poles that were bent near the top to converge at the high center peak. And this umbrella tent design has been the most stable and most comfortable family camping tent for the past 70 years. But for some reason, tent makers stopped using the term umbrella tent around the year 2000 and now refer to these tents as cabin tents. The tunnel tent is a relatively new single-wall tent design. Its frame consists of 3 or 4 lightweight, flexible poles, preferably aluminum, that bend over the tent from one side to the other side. It has been very popular among European camping families for many years, but only recently has emerged here in the United States as a popular tent design. And the dome tent is another relatively new tent design that has been extremely popular with backpackers and to a lesser extent with tent camping families. Its basic frame consists of 2 lightweight, flexible poles, preferably aluminum, that bend over the tent from one corner to its diagonal opposite. A unique feature of these dome tents is that most of them have two walls. They have an inner canopy that has a lot of mesh, and they also have a waterproof rainfly that covers the inner canopy. Today, most other tent designs also have a waterproof rainfly. For example, this is an umbrella tent with a partial coverage rainfly.
Now let's discuss features to consider before buying a tent.
First, let's talk about fabrics used to make tents. Canvas tents hold in the heat well and block the wind, but they are very heavy and they require long drying time. Nylon was a popular tent making material back in the late 1900s and early 2000s because it was very lightweight but strong. But when it got wet, it would stretch and sag. Today, most lightweight tents are made from polyester, but it can be very drafty and cool on cool nights. If you buy a tent made by a quality maker, then it should be ready for rain right out of the box. Tents made from polyester or nylon will usually have tape seams to prevent leakage and a waterproof rainfly. Recently, some tent makers have reported the hydrostatic head of their rainfly. A head of 1,000 millimeters is barely waterproof, while a head of 5,000 millimeters is very waterproof. If you typically camp in hot weather, then you'll want a tent or an inner canopy with lots of mesh, and that mesh should extend from the roof all the way down to the ground. If it's a double wall tent, then you can clip two corners of the rainfly onto the one side of the canopy and leave the rainfly on the ground beside the tent where it's ready to pull over the top in case of rain. If you frequently camp in cool weather, then you should strongly consider buying a canvas tent, but it will be expensive. If you decide to buy a polyester tent, look for one that has fabric sidewalls with mesh windows that can be zipped closed and a full coverage rainfly. If you frequently camp in windy or stormy weather, then you should consider buying a dome or tunnel type tent with a low ceiling height and a full coverage rainfly. If it's cooler, windy weather, then you should consider a canvas tent. Umbrella tents and old-style cabin tents with a high ceiling and vertical sidewalls provide the most amount of inside space and comfort. That allows you to set up chairs and cots, stand up, walk around, and get dressed easily. But these high-profile tents can be easily damaged by high wind even when they're staked out properly. Dome tents, on the other hand, typically have a lower ceiling height and steeply sloped walls that provide much less comfort but much better wind protection. Before concluding, I suggest that you avoid family tents with garages and large vestibules because they require extra setup space that may not be available in many campsites. And vestibules and garages have only one legitimate function: to keep the ground in front of your front door dry in rainy weather.
And now, here are our top picks for 2021.
My first pick is the Eureka Copper Canyon LX6. This tent is a super comfortable polyester umbrella tent with an extra large 10-foot by 10-foot floor and vertical sidewalls. It has large mesh windows that can be covered in cool weather and a small awning that provides a dry entryway in rainy weather. It has 7-foot ceiling peak and costs a very economical $300. Its primary limitation is its heavy weight of 22 pounds. Also, some owners are disappointed with the toggle window closure system, but we haven't had a problem with that. Our second pick is a Kodiak Flexbow Deluxe 10 foot by 10 foot. This is a canvas tent that has an unusual cabin tent design with a very large and comfortable 10 foot by 10 foot floor and vertical sidewalls. It has large mesh windows that extend from the roof down to the ground that can be opened in hot weather for plenty of ventilation or zip close in cold weather to hold in the heat. Its primary limitations are it's very heavy, 68 pounds. It requires long drying time, and it costs $550. My third pick is a Marmot limestone 6-person tent with 83 square feet of floor space. This is a large dome-style tent with 2 extra poles to pull out the walls to a more vertical position. It has an inner canopy with large mesh panels that make it especially comfortable in hot weather, and also has a full coverage rainfly for windy weather. At 17 pounds, it is the lightest and most packable of my top picks. Its primary limitations are it can get cool when the temperatures drop below 70, and it costs $580. My fourth choice is the REI Co-op Kingdom 6. This is a tunnel tent with near vertical sidewalls, lots of mesh for ventilation, an 83 square foot floor, a 6.5 foot ceiling, and it weighs 21 pounds. Its primary limitations are it's a little more difficult to set up than other 6-person tents. It's a little unstable in high winds unless guy lines are added to the front and back, and it costs $500. I was unable to pick the best 5th choice, but I invite you to visit my website, moderntentcamping.com, where you'll find 16 more great 6-person family camping tents with Amazon links for more information. A link to my website is provided in the description below.
Remember, take more trips, travel further, visit more attractions, and save money. Go tent camping.
For more information about tent designs, you may want to read my book, Basic Tent Camping. You can order a copy directly from me or from Amazon.com. And follow my Facebook page, Modern Tent Camping. Thanks for watching.